the voice of the resistance. Peru is once again in the spotlight as the country faces a profound political and social crisis, with reports of the military using lethal fragmentation bullets against indigenous protesters, resulting in 48 deaths as of Friday, January 14th. And an unknown number of individuals arrested or disappeared, while calls for the resignation of Dina Boluarte are increasing. Raúl Pacheco is an independent Cuzco-based journalist and editor of a local newspaper that ever since the protest started has been the subject of cyber attacks. After witnessing firsthand the violence, he was still shocked when we contacted him.
Peru se desangra. Es lo que te puedo decir, ¿no?
Peru is bleeding out. What I can tell you is Peru is experiencing the worst moment, I think, of its recent Republican history after what the times of terrorism and Shining Path meant, which ended more or less around the 90s. After that moment, we have never lived through something like this. There are deaths every day in this country of Dina Boluarte. The president, whom we consider a usurper, took office on December 7th. Today is January 12th. She has 35 days in power. In 35 days, there have been 47 deaths, or more or less one death every 20 hours under her government. This is due to the protests and the excessive and disproportionate repression of the police forces. Here in Cuzco, my city has buried the first death. Cities like Puno, a week ago, in a single day, 18 people died. It was a parade of coffins, and it was creepy. As I was saying yesterday, the first person from Cuzco died in the midst of the protests, with a bullet shot to the abdomen and thorax. Something we don't understand. Why? Why do police forces kill civilians? Why repression? Why do they use firearms and shoot directly at the body? My country, my city is bleeding to death, and it hurts us a lot. Oscar, we are extremely hurt.
We asked Pacheco to compare the recent massacres of indigenous protesters in Peru to those that occurred during the civil conflict against Sendero Luminoso, a Maoist guerrilla group in the 90s. The violence committed by Sendero Luminoso, as well as the collateral violence caused by the army's response to it, reached alarming levels during this time. Both sides of the conflict, despite being supposed to protect the same people, caused harm to the towns caught in the crossfire.
Yes, fire was opened in the peasant communities. Killings were carried out, especially of peasants, because the army was not capable of identifying who were Shining Path members and who were not, because this organization had a very effective camouflage system. So as I told you, instead of looking for a needle in the haystack, they set the haystack on fire. And as a result, hundreds of Peruvians died, thousands of Peruvians in peasant communities in rural areas. Today, the confrontation is clearly focused on the cities, in the capitals of the southern regions of Peru, especially Ayacucho and Andahuaylas. Important cities count every hour with 8, 10, 17 deaths in Cuzco. And all of these are due to a conception that the state has, which is strategic assets must be defended. And the strategic assets are, for example, the airports and things like that. And the people who go out to demonstrate try to take over the airports because it's kind of a symbol. That is, you take the airport and it means that you are weakening the state as well. So the state protects the airports at any cost, trying to prevent people from arriving, and when people get close and feel excessive, they shoot directly at the body. They shoot directly at the body, at the head. No pellets are used. At some point they were used, but now there are deaths. The death we have in Cuzco is a shot, a firearm projectile at the height of the abdomen, and thorax, a wound. Furthermore, the Peruvian government is being accused of using these bullets. I don't know if you know, they are called dum-dum, the expansive bullets that have an entrance hole but no exit hole. The doctor in Puno came out to testify and said, "I don't understand what's going on, but what I'm seeing here is that the bullets enter and destroy all of the organs. And this is terrible. Even minors and the doctor who came out to help the wounded have been killed. The doctor." Today in Puno, after several days of agony, a 15-year-old boy has died. The boy was with his mother passing through the area where he saw the conflicts. They were walking and a stray bullet hit him in the head. And today this 15-year-old boy is the 47th victim that this government has. And with all these crimes, the government doesn't budge an eyelash, doesn't budge an eyebrow. The Congress, supported by a majority, a fascist right, which we call here brute and challenging, does not flinch, literally, and shows President Boluarte full support.
In the past, similar atrocities were committed, resulting in the conviction and imprisonment of Alberto Fujimori and Vladimiro Montesinos for human rights violations, and death squads crimes under their direct orders. Keiko Fujimori, Alberto Fujimori's daughter, rose to prominence in Peru right wing and ran for office, but lost in 2 consecutive elections, including the most recent election against Pedro Castillo, despite making false claims of fraud. Now, with the army killing protesters in the streets, many hold Keiko Fujimori's desire for power responsible for the current crisis.
Everything that is happening now in the country, everything that happens in Peru today, has a root, and it is the Fujimori Constitution of 1993. Here we live in an economy that creates large gaps, with impressive poverty in rural areas and apparent economic growth in urban areas. In big cities like Lima, Arequipa, even Cuzco, where they live with this myth of tourism. We have an extremely neoliberal constitution that considers that health and education are not rights and are services, a constitution that reduces state intervention to a minimum and that generates these social gaps. And behind these protests, there is a common request. It is the request for a constituent assembly. In fact, the request is that the country be consulted if it wants a constituent assembly, not the assembly itself. It's only a referendum to determine what the public wants, but the right wing and the entire oligarchic system, and the mining companies and others, which also live exempt from taxes, they don't allow it and they won't allow it. They are defending this model, this constitution, imposed by Alberto Fujimori and by the extreme right. And while Keiko Fujimori did not become president, her political organization is the one that controls Peru's Congress, as she controlled it a few years ago when Pedro Pablo Kuczynski was deposed as well, with more than 50% of congressmen. She had about 70 out of 130. And today, in alliance with other benches, with other groups, Keiko Fujimori controls Congress. Today, Fujimorismo operates as Popular Force, and that's what it's called, allied with right-wing groups like Popular Renovation. As País advances, they have controlled the government. The worst sin of Pedro Castillo, the former president who was deposed, was announcing that he wanted a new constitution. And today, the current president is Dina Boluarte, who was also Castillo's vice president, and who had said that if anything happened to Pedro Castillo, she would go too. Today, Boluarte has the full support of Fujimori and that of right-wing groups and mainstream media. A media that builds a narrative inspired by Alberto Fujimori's philosophy, which is that of inventing terrorists. If you are against the government, they call you a terrorist and associate you directly with terrorism. If you go out to protest, you are a terrorist. In Peru, the favorite sport of the right is inventing terrorists. A month before the government took over, all the right-wing benches said, by any means we are going to depose him. Either depose him, force him to resign, or we are going to suspend him. And that was the only agenda of Congress during the 16 months of Pedro Castillo's government. In 16 months, he had 3 presidential vacancy motions, something never seen before.
3 mociones de vacancia presidencial, algo jamás visto.
Jorge Chávez Cresta, Peru's Minister of Defense and Armed Force, denied the accusations that armed forces were shooting fragmentation bullets. In fact, according to the Peruvian authorities, it was the insurrectionists, as they call them, who were receiving such ammunition from across the Bolivian border. The Grayzone also interviewed Alcides Condori Cruz, an indigenous farmer, army veteran, and member of the local Comunero group, who is actively participating in protests against the removal of former President Pedro Castillo. He was present at the Tupac Amaru Plaza, the focal point of resistance in Cuzco and the surrounding region.
We see here that there is absolutely no presence of the national press. The capital press does not exist. Here you will only find the press of Cuzco, only local press, nothing more. Only they can be seen here, but the national media do not cover this great struggle. That is why in the world they hardly see us. They think that everything is fine. They do not know that we are here and that they are killing us. They are killing us. Look here. Look here, I'm going to show you with the camera the crowd of people who are here. Spontaneously, with a self-convocation, self-summoning, that's what you have to understand. So I find myself in one of the main squares of Cuzco. Yes, there are thousands, 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 as you see it. Thousands, thousands, and thousands here. You see? Staying overnight? There are collaborators and the activists who stay 3, 4, or more days. Look how it is. You'll see. Look how they are there. Others who are arriving, as you will see, and they normally, well, we are here 2 hours, 3 hours every day.
Soy un ciudadano en sí, no soy periodista, no soy absolutamente nada, soy un ciudadano que sí también.
I'm a citizen myself. I'm not a journalist. I'm just a citizen. I have truly joined the protest because I am truly outraged that this government is repressing us with the power of the army, with the power of the police, with the power of neoliberalism, of capitalism, and with the help of the United States. It was clear from before this crisis that something like this would happen. It is clear that they removed President Castillo for a reason, because he was going to make a very big political contract called La Patria Grande, and this contract does not benefit the United States at all.
Este contrato Patria Grande pues no favorecía absolutamente nada a Estados Unidos.
The concept of Patria Grande, or Great Homeland, in the South American political imaginary refers to the idea of a united and independent South America, free from foreign influence and control. This idea has been present in the region's political discourse for centuries and has been championed by various leaders and political movements throughout history. It is often associated with the idea of Pan-American identity and the rejection of colonialism and imperialism. Precisely in this case, Condori Cruz refers to South American leaders who are considering an ambitious rail project that will connect the region, creating new trade and investment opportunities. The project, which was led by Bolivian President Luis Alberto Arce and Peru's deposed President Pedro Castillo, aimed to bring Chile's new elected leader Gabriel Boric to the negotiating table. With Brazil's former leader Jair Bolsonaro, who had denied the project, out of office now, and replaced by Lula da Silva, the project has now the potential to gain more support and bring significant changes to the region. The rail project, referred to as Patria Grande, could revolutionize the way South American countries interact and cooperate with each other, and bring further economic growth to the entire region, creating an enormous economic and trade market. According to the Bolivian Institute of Foreign Trade,
the project aims to build a high-speed railway of almost 4,000 kilometers between the Atlantic Santos and the Pacific Yo, passing through Bolivian territory and with links to the Paraguay-Parana waterway and the railway networks of Argentina and Chile.
This is a perfect sample of the high stakes, depending on the political balance of the region. Such a project, further uniting South America, could indeed have many potential benefits for the region. Yet Bolsonaro denied it for many years, and now Boluarte could potentially challenge it. Economic integration, for example, could lead to increased trade and investment. Additionally, a united South America could potentially negotiate better terms for trade and investment with other countries and regions.
That Patria Grande was going to be unified with a great project, the trains from Tumbes to Piura, which is from border to border in Peru, likewise also from Cuzco to what is Bolivia, Argentina, and Brazil. What happened? What is the problem that the United States had with this contract? And that is why they removed Castillo, the former president, because if this contract prospered, the United States would be left behind. Why? Because it would not have a major stake in our new economy, our raw materials. So I would even dare to say that China would automatically gain an upper hand at becoming the world power. That is why capitalism did not like it. Also, Castillo wanted to force large companies to comply with their respective government contracts, which are called contracts of law. This is the name given to the concessions that the state has given for about 30 years. Concessions that they have given for 30 years of our great resources. For example, the minerals that we have, gold, oil, copper, silver, likewise other resources such as agriculture and many more.
Pedro Castillo had plans to review the Contratos Ley, which are the decades-long state concessions of services and natural resources in Peru. His goal was to shift the earning ratio from 20% for the state and 80% for corporations to the opposite, in favor of the state. This change will have a significant impact on companies, particularly those that had not fulfilled their obligations under the contracts with the state.
These contracts would then expire, and the opposition does not want this. That is why they removed Castillo, and now we find ourselves in a political crisis. And to get out of this political crisis, what are we looking for? There are three fundamental things, which is what ordinary Peruvians want. The Peruvians who have truly elected our president, Pedro Castillo, who was elected with great support.
Hemos elegido a nuestro presidente, que es Castillo, y también con un gran respaldo.
The points are these. 1. The immediate resignation of the supposed president, Dina Boluarte. 2. The resignation of Congress. 3. Immediate elections.
La renuncia o que el Congreso pueda dar un paso al costado. 3. Lo que es.
Why do people call for immediate elections? Because the government and Congress have been truly incapable. But Peru's Congress and the government decided to postpone the elections for practically a year and a half, and people don't want that. Why? Because it has been done twice before. And a former president, by the way, a Cuzqueño, Valentin Paniagua, did it.
El expresidente, un cusqueño, por cierto, que era Valentín Paniagua, hizo lo mismo. El tema de las nuevas elecciones en 6 meses y justamente ahora se podría hacer igual.
The issue of new elections in 6 months has already been done, and it can be done again. But why would the United States start a crisis here? The issue is CONFIEP.
CONFIEP, or the National Confederation of Private Business Institutions, is a union of business groups in Peru that represents the interest of private enterprises and industry in the country. It is logical to assume that an organization that represents such a large segment of the economy will have significant influence and control over industry and market share. However, it is important to note that the extent of CONFIEP's power and influence might depend on the context and a specific issue at hand. That being said, some people, particularly members of the working class, might agree with the assertion that CONFIEP holds significant power and exerts a great deal of control over government policies and decision-making.
¿Por qué? Porque la CONFIEP en sí se los ha comprado primero a la prensa nacional.
CONFIEP has brought the national press, which we refer to as the pink press, jam press, or trash television, as we call it. And mind you, the owners of these media outlets are not even Peruvian. They are from Panama and Mexico. The press has sold its conscience to large monopoly companies that dominate Peru, such as Leche Gloria, for example, and Peru Rail, Inca Pharma, Lapan, etc.
O lo que es Inca Pharma, Latam, etc. Antes teníamos lo que es Aerocondor, pero ahora no los tenemos. Y así mismo, ellos compraron.
We used to have Aero Condor, a public service. Now it's gone. As a result, these companies have bought Congress and are monopolizing it, controlling the ministers and more. This is how Peru finds itself in a crisis. We are protesting peacefully, but what has happened? The repression came from the state, the army, and the police. The armed forces are killing us. We have more than 48 deaths, and many of them are not even identified. There are dozens and hundreds of wounded. Just like I was showing you before, people are donating blood because there is no blood bank in the hospitals of Cuzco, and the same goes for the rest of the country. They won't be able to supply the demand. Apart from all of this, the roads are closed, products and tourists can't enter, so the crisis keeps getting worse and worse. The government is calling us terrorists from the shining path, and this inflames the population a lot. They say we're in the shining path, but none of the people who have been captured or detained and are currently in the police stations have anything on their records that associates them with the shining path or anything like that. The president says we are financed by illegal mining and drug trafficking, but that's not true. We can ask around here and you'll see. Here we are all self-summoned, all of us. People here are independent workers, and the same goes for the people in the South. They are not like the people in capitalism who only work. Here there are farmers, merchants, and a few are state workers. So it bothers us that they call us terrorists, and that's why we are in the streets.
Mainstream media and the Peruvian government have accused the protesters of causing violence and labeled them as terrorists, claiming they are financed by drug traffickers and illegal miners. This portrayal has led to an increase in violence, to the point that the army is openly killing people on the streets.
Here, if you look around, you will see the preparation and sharing of food. What will you see? Simple people, humble peasants, country folk, and traders.
Gente del campo, gente que realmente negocia. Ahí voy a cambiar mi cámara.
I'm going to change my camera so you can see the food, the commensality. That's how we are, preparing meals for everyone in different places. The ladies, dressed in traditional clothing, are all fighting. It's not that we are terrorists, drug traffickers, or financed by anyone. For example, here you can see that people are making and sharing food together. And if we were financed, we would eat something better, not just rice with onions. And so, there are those who are organizing here, for example, the issue of education, voluntary universities, communities, and different sectors of society. And here, for example, we receive solidarity donations for those who go on strike during the week. And likewise, all of civil society is together here.
Peru's political class, represented in Congress by senators like Jorge Montoya, sees the protesters as hordes, attacking police and causing the violence. After a year of political war against Pedro Castillo, Senador Montoya blamed Castillo, who is in jail, for mobilizing his supporters through agitation and propaganda. President Boluarte addressed the nation on Saturday 14, arguing a compromise with democracy. She refused to step down, despite more and more professional associations, intellectuals, and even governors calling for her resignation. Back in the Plaza de Armas in Cuzco, Alcides Condoricruz denounces Boluarte's government for using forbidden weapons against civilians.
Nos están reprimiendo, pero no puesto realmente, como ellos dicen, con armas no letales.
The government is lying when it says it's not using lethal weapons. They are using tear gas, hand grenades, rubber bullets, and pellet cartridges. These weapons are causing injuries and death, which is why people are donating blood. Additionally, there is a type of bullet that the police are using. It's not even allowed in war. It's designed to open upon impact once inside the body. It's a very dangerous weapon. I can't remember the name of that type of bullet.
Yeah, they're called fragmentation bullets.
Exacto. Es con eso se están dando, imagínate.
Exactly. It's with those bullets. Imagine, one single bullet of those is lethal. Because a bullet could fracture your arm, it explodes, practically killing you. If they hit you in the thorax, they have already killed you. This is what's happening in Juliaca and everywhere. We denounced this before the human rights delegation. Additionally, we are here with a person from the countryside. I will show you. He has to walk almost 4 hours to get here. A person from the countryside who also comes here. Imagine staying for almost 4 days, only with his backpack. We're transmitting for media in the United States. Yes, you can speak to us in your language. Tell us what you're looking for.
alin kilaktaman chay mun because kilaktaman aka marcapat kilaktaman de provincia que explican chay mandara pues asaban pero ichaka no kamonane luchane que Dina Boluarte zipunanta monane cajeta chico mistakona lo zipunanta monane nueva constitución de monane elección apaco chun pronto chay tan reclamas para no jamone y luchas a kutak laktaman hasta lograr no kama yo la coi con que manta gracias
Marcapata, lo que el señor menciona.
What the man mentions, he lives almost 7 or 6 hours away. He is in the jungle. He is on a mountain itself next to the jungle. Thus people have very small houses and thus agriculture and livestock. There is absolutely no mining issue. There is no cocoa there. So the government can't say that we are financed by narcos. The people who come here are like him, as you see. When the human rights delegations came, the police did not let the delegates from the left wing enter, only from the right wing. Only opposition delegates entered, representing capitalism and the coup, and they gave their particular version of the information. So what truth will be reported about in this case? Probably none. I personally, through this means, send my request, my call for all these people who are fighting for our children, for everything, for their families, for progress, and particularly for economic stability. I call for international aid so that all countries agree to help us and intervene. Today we ask for this international aid because they are practically killing us. There is no food, as you will see. There are no medicines. The state provides practically nothing here in the south. Absolutely nothing. They are repressing us. They are killing us with the armed forces and the army. And they use, as I repeat, fragmentation bullets. Bullets that are not even allowed in war, right? So that is how it goes. While we are here eating rice with onion or something like that and sharing the food with each other, as we have shown you. Now Ambassador Lisa Kenna has arrived at the U.S. Embassy. She recently said that the United States is donating $8 million supposedly to combat drugs, terrorism, illegal mining, and so on. But that money will not be used like that. Here the ones that dominate are the heads of the armed forces. I personally was in the army for more than 8 years, and I was infiltrated in the coca growing areas, which I know like the back of my hand. But what happened? First of all, it's not like the drug trade will ever end. Why? The person who flipped is in the Navy, one of our several generals of the Peruvian Navy, along with the Minister of the Interior, and secondly, the police. Why? I'm going to tell you, and with reasons. First of all, the Peruvian Navy controls geolocation. It controls the cardinal points of the entire area thanks to a satellite supported by Europe. These are called combined operations under command of the Peruvian Navy. So in the Peruvian Navy, there are generals who are drug traffickers, and they notify the drug traffickers when there are operations to capture them. The combined forces are made up of the Navy, the Army, and the police. However, in the operations, the narco marines send them to the wrong places. Meanwhile, they notify the drug traffickers. By the time the police and the army arrive at the right place, they can no longer find them, and thus they will never end the drug trade. The questions are coming out now that there are so many investigations that are coming to light. For example, we are talking about Lisa Kenna, the ambassador of the United States. Who is she? She is a former CIA. This is clearly proven. She is a former CIA, but they deny it.
Está claramente comprobado. Él es un ex CIA. Pero ellos qué dicen, no, es así.
Lisa D. Kina, who served 9 years in the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, is now the U.S. ambassador to Peru since 2021. She previously served as the Executive Secretary of the United States Department of State under President Donald Trump. She also worked at the Foreign Service with Mike Pompeo at the Department of State. According to El Peruano newspaper, Gustavo Bobbio Rosas, a retired Army Brigadier General and new Minister of Defense, visited Lisa Kenna to discuss subjects of mutual interest on December the 5th, just 2 days before Pedro Castillo was deposed.
¿Qué es lo que pasa? Supuestamente ahorita dicen que vienen a $8 millones.
So I tell you, supposedly today there will be $8 million that the United States will give us, but this is not going to be used to fight drug traffickers. It is simply a smokescreen to strengthen the armed forces so that they continue killing us, despite the fact that nobody here is a terrorist.
Porque aquí nadie es terrorista.